Well, all right. Welcome back to another episode of If It Be Your Will podcast. Today I am again reaching down south because up here in the north it is a blistery cold snowstorm. Lots of snow coming in, but I have
Magana.
Magana. I have Jeni, who is the band. I'm sure she has lots of other helpers along the way. And we're going to kind of jump into her musical history a little bit. And I want to ask so many different questions, but we'll start slowly. So, Jeni, thanks so much for hopping on here and joining me for a little conversation.
My pleasure.
Now, Jeni, you are quite a talented artist. I've looked at your photography, amazing.
Thank you.
I've looked at your collaborations with other artists, amazing. And now you have your own stuff that you're putting out. And as I just mentioned, your latest record, Teeth, is coming out in 2 days on March 25th of this year. I always like to kind of start off like, where did it all start for you? Where did music, like, and art and creative expression start to become something that you knew was never going to be not a part of you?
I think from the very beginning, I knew that I was always going to play music. I didn't know if it was going to be a career. I didn't have like a plan. I was a child. And that all started from boredom, to be totally honest. I spent a lot of summers at my family's fruit stand, which we don't have anymore.
Okay.
And it was, 105 degrees and middle of nowhere. And I sang a lot for fun, and I started taking piano lessons from the church that was down the road. We paid them in fruit from the pastor's wife. And yeah, I was like, oh, this is me. Like, it was like coming home.
Hmm. Hmm. And where was that you grew up, Jeni? Where?
Bakersfield, California, where a lot of our
Oh,
produce comes from, San Joaquin Valley.
wow, wow. And totally out of curiosity, because I love fruit stands. Like, what were your main fruits that you guys like to sell?
Um, they had a really good variety. We grew locally a lot of the melons.
Yep.
And my family still has an orange grove out in that area. And we imported like cherries from Washington. We imported from a lot of places, but
Right.
cantaloupe will always be my favorite fruit because of the fruit stand.
Nice. And like, when did music start for you? Like you were saying, out of boredom, you would kind of like, what were your earliest kind of memories of the things that you were listening to, or your parents were listening to, that kind of was like caught your ear? And like, what kind of genre or artists were your earliest inspirations?
Honestly, my earliest memories are of me making music. Um, I didn't know my parents listened to music, but it was like a smattering of whatever was around. There's a lot of country music in Bakersfield, so a lot of that, George Strait.
Right,
And a lot
right.
of my dad listened to a lot of straight ahead jazz,
Mhm.
but it wasn't really that prevalent in our household. Um, some of my earliest memories was listening to my mom playing the piano that was in the house, just like warm-ups and stuff like that. Um, and so it's always to me been something that it's like cooking, like that I make. It's not necessarily something I consume second, I make first.
Right, right. You're a maker. Like,
Yeah.
would you classify yourself as a maker?
Yeah, I call it like a fiddler, but yeah. Like
Right,
I'm always like messing around with stuff.
right, right. And when did you start actually um writing complete songs? Or like, what was that process like, where eventually you thought you're going to put yourself out there a little bit more and create songs that you wanted other people to listen to and share?
I was really lucky, I think, because I was born, just barely pre-internet. And
Right.
um and I think that the evolution of me making and putting out music was so much less um available. Like I didn't have to be as self-conscious about it as people do nowadays.
Hmm.
So started playing guitar maybe junior high, high school sometime. I
Mhm.
picked up bass in junior high, and then guitar was just a couple more strings. So I was like, well, I can do this. And I started writing songs on guitar, and I would just play them for my friends all the time. They were all like, oh, I know that song. And they were goofy, they were dumb songs, but all of my friends were like, oh my God, play that one. I know it, and it wasn't even something I had to think about. And then I joined a band in high school, a couple bands, and we played like for our whole school. I sang the national anthem, and we put on a performance at a rally, and like
Wow.
it just didn't seem weird because no one was recording it really for their future. It was all just very present.
Right.
And yeah, so those are my first kind of forays into that. But it was a very natural slip because it was just like, yeah, you play it in your room alone, you play it for some friends, you play it for some more friends, and then you forget about it and you move on and you go to the
Right.
next thing.
Well. And I saw on your Bandcamp page that your first single came out in 2016, is it? Or 2017?
I think so, yeah, 2016.
Well, and like, what was your life like at that stage when you started to kind of release your own stuff? Were you already collaborating with other artists in other bands?
Yeah. So I had started like a solo frontman journey, I guess, in college because I was playing bass for a lot of people in college and in bands and having a lot of say as to how the song should go or what the structure should be, but not total complete say. And
Hmm.
that is good, I think, but also I wanted like an outlet where I could experiment and have my own opinions take forefront and give myself the space for that,
Right.
um, just to see what that would be like. But I didn't want to play bass and be the front man. Like I wanted to write on guitar, but I just didn't feel super confident on guitar. So I collaborated with a lot of different people. Um, and I had bands where I got
Right.
final say, but we all collaborated and I had other guitar players and it went through a lot of different iterations. But the thing is, I had so many talented friends. I went to Berkeley and you just make a lot of really talented friends when you go to music school. Um, but they were all so busy.
Hmm.
And they
Hmm.
were so wonderful to play with me, but they were just constantly unavailable. And I was working a day, like a kind of grueling middle management day job in New York to try to make ends meet so that I could play music when I wanted to. And then they were never available. And I finally was like, that's it. I have to figure this out. And that was the birth of that single was I was like, I just have to get like more confident at guitar and figure out how I can do this by myself. And I still wanted to collaborate with people, but I was like, I need to be able to do this when I want to, or I'm going to go insane and I'm just going to work this middle management job. And like, what have I done?
Right. Right.
um, so that was kind of the beginning of this journey of like autonomy, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And are you able now to invest most of your time in your art and your music, your photography? Like, are you able to survive on music?
Yeah. That is, it's the balance within that
Hmm.
shifts because it's not a
Sure.
super stable
Right.
career. But yeah, it's been years of just art of some kind.
Amazing. Amazing. And what are your biggest, what are the biggest attributes to that, to being, to arriving at this spot where you can do what you're passionate about and that you love to do, as opposed to having to kind of, do this middle management kind of job where it's just, going through the motions. What were some of those big tipping points where things kind of shifted, as you said?
Hmm. I think that that's a two-parter for me. So
Hmm.
I think I'm not sure that I actually think a career in art is better than having just a job and then also doing something that you love. I think there's a certain point where even if you're working in art, like a job's a job. Like I've photographed a lot of events, weddings. I play for other people, and I'm so lucky to admire the people that I play for, but it's still like
mm,
kind of customer service in a way. You're doing what other people want.
mm,
Um, and if you don't want to compromise any of that, then and you don't want to have the extra stress that comes with being an artist full time, then I think there's nothing wrong with having a different job and then having the time and freedom and mental capacity to be able to make your own art.
right.
That being said, I kind of left college thinking I'm going to try to do something job related with music. And so even when I got these other jobs, I was thinking, how is this flexible in the way I need it to be? How am I taking the next steps toward playing music? What does that look like? That was kind of always in the back of my mind.
Mm,
The first thing that I would say that happened is I was playing a bunch of gigs in New York, and I came home one day. I had roommates, and I was carrying my upright bass up the stairs and like lumbering through the doorway, and he was recording. My roommate was recording this girl, Annie Lynch, who
mhm,
we had kind of gone to school with and I really admired, but I didn't know her. And she was like, "Oh, perfect. I need a bassist for this track." And so I went, and it was just kind of a casual thing. I went
mm,
and played bass for her, and then she was like, "Great, should you play the show that we're gonna do?" And I was like, "Okay." And then I ended up touring with her. And that was my first post-college touring experience
mhm,
for a long time. And it's how I met a lot of people, and it's how I got a bunch of other subsequent gigs.
right.
And so I can kind of point to that moment and be like, ah, yes. Being
That's
there
cool.
at that time, like having bass in hand really worked out for me in that way. Um, and then another like probably obvious one is my day job was at TripAdvisor. I actually really loved that job. I was photo editing. But it was kind of it was like a permanent gig and it was coming to a close. And I was working for a cruise critic, their like sister company, I guess. And that contract was up at the end of the month, and I wasn't quite sure what I was going to do. And in that month, sometime I got an email from Mitski just being like, "Oh, do you want to be in my band?"
Mm,
And that must have been, I don't know, maybe also 2016, and has been a great source of inspiration and money for me in the past several years.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And how did that relationship get hatched? Like how did she come to know what you do and how you play? And I mean, she must have heard things that you were putting down on tape.
Yeah, the music world is funny, I think.
Mm,
It was a recommendation from somebody that I knew from college, and she had met Mitski because she did sound at Brooklyn Steel, and Mitski played Brooklyn Steel, and that's how they met.
okay.
And then Mitski just wanted a bassist, asked if she had any recs, and like they gave her a list, and she was like, "Oh, let's like choose a woman."
Mm, mm, that's
Um,
cool.
there's a certain level, I think, and this is not always the case, but there's a certain level where when you're getting a recommendation from somebody, you know that they can play well already because they're already out there doing it, and you know that they're willing
Right.
to do it and they're responsible and they're showing up. And what you're looking for is like, can I live with you for months
Mm,
at a time in a cramped
right.
space?
Right. Right. I've heard stories of from other musicians saying that there has to be a friendship there or it's going to be excruciating touring because of like what you're mentioning, the closeness and the proximity. You're like right there with each other all the time.
Yeah.
And that if you don't harness those friendships, it really starts to compound and stress levels go up. And so what's the relationship with the whole band as you guys tour?
Well, this year almost an entirely new band, so a
Hmm,
bunch of new friends, and almost, I mean, there's a lot of the same crew, but because our crew has been so much smaller, there's a whole bunch of new people.
hmm,
Um, and we're generally not using a bus. And so there's not that forced proximity. which is great.
Right.
It's relaxing and calm, and I get my personal space, and I really need that. But it is going to take longer to develop those relationships.
Hmm.
It's a little bit more like going to an office every day
Right.
than it. I mean, it's not quite that because we're still traveling together, and the only people we know in several cities are each other.
Right.
But
Right.
it's a sharp contrast to 2 years ago, which was just outside of COVID, still really cautious. And there were five of us, I think, and we only saw each other for like a
Mm.
year.
Wow. Wow.
Um, and we were on a bus and we were in a COVID bubble, and that was like we became a cult. Like it was a little bit too much togetherness. We became a little bit codependent. I still talk to even those people that aren't on this run. I'm like talking to them every day.
Yeah, coming out of the pandemic, it was just it still is an interesting time.
Yeah.
It seems so far away yet so close still.
Yeah.
It's fascinating. So talking about COVID, Teeth is would I could I say a pandemic record?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And talk a little bit about how that came to be, Jenny. Like what did you have a bunch of songs that you had it, or did they all begin when we were in lockdown?
I would say 90% of them started in lockdown, just became songs during that period of time. Like we kind of talked about before, I just can't, I have to make stuff. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and my mind is best occupied when I'm learning something. And so it's like a really good way that I procrastinate is by like, oh, I'll just learn this thing instead of doing my taxes, you know?
Right.
Um, or facing reality that I'm really confused and freaked out about what's going on in the world. And so a friend came and visited and was like, "Hey, like, do you want to learn some more stuff about synth?" I played bass synth already, but I didn't really know that much about it. I hadn't just gone into the scope of what the synth world could be. So we borrowed my husband's Prophet, and he was giving me just basic rundown lessons of this is like LFO 1, 2, 3, 4, and here's how you can change them and all of that stuff. And like some of the first sounds I made were, and then I started running it through my pedal board, my guitar pedal board, because I didn't know how to input it into my computer because recording was kind of new for me too. So some of that stuff actually became I Cannot Breathe. That was like one of my first. I called them. I have a folder of hard on my hard drive called jams, and I called them little jams. So for a long time, like the interlude that's at the end, XXO, was just called Clarinet Jam 4 or something.
Nice.
Um, yeah,
Cool.
it was definitely all experimental, probably to avoid a lot of how I was feeling.
I like that. I mean, I think that coping mechanisms kicked in during those years.
Yeah.
And you just did whatever you had to do to get through.
Yeah.
Um, talk a little bit about it. What's your songwriting process like? Like, how does a song come to be for you? Like, what's your approach to it?
If you would have asked me before COVID, I would have
Hmm.
said I sit down with a guitar, I come up with something that sounds kind of interesting, and I kind of sing words until something comes to me, just kind of any words. Um, and that's mostly been it. You know, there are always variants, but
Hmm.
yeah, but now I don't know, it's chaos because that whole process was like, oh, I want to see what happens if I manipulate the clarinet line in this way, or like, oh, I want to see what happens if I plug this instrument in, and then just kind of tracking and then being like, well, maybe words could fit here. I don't know. What's this about? Um, so there's a lot more variety, which I think
Okay.
actually really served the record well, but I'm hoping to stick with that. And now I'm not in the phase of my life where I'm writing lyrics so much, but I still will pick up something like I've been practicing bass a lot because I'm my job. And
Hmm.
I'll pick it up and be like, oh, that's a good idea. And I'll record like a verse and then in my phone and then like leave it. I don't know.
Okay.
Probably, I'm
So,
a really big believer of the theory that ideas just kind of live and then are gifted to you, and if you don't use them, they just move on to someone else.
hmm.
So I'm thinking that a lot of these will be gone by the time I come back to them.
Right, right. And I mean, with your, I imagine that life is busy. Like, where do you find time? I guess you find time wherever you can to gather little snippets, and it sounds like very much like a tapestry that you have pieces, and then you build around those pieces.
Yeah, that's a beautiful way of thinking about it.
Yeah, it's amazing too. You got 14 tracks on this record.
There were like 40 tracks to choose from, and,
Wow.
and I not all finished. Um,
Hmm.
I had no idea what I was doing. I was just going forth, opening up random things, picking up old songs, like redoing those. I put them all in a Google Drive folder, and I was just like, I don't know. And then my husband's friend Mike DeSanto came to visit. I guess he's my
Hmm.
friend too, but they were in a band together. They've known each other since college. And he was like, "Oh, hey, like, what have you been up to?" And I was like, "Oh, I just been making some demos of stuff." And he was like, "Oh, cool. What's your process like?" And I was like, "Oh, I'll just send them to you." Like, and he went back to New York and didn't say anything about them for like a week or two. And I was like, "Oh, he never listened. People do that all the time. I'm not really stressed about it." And then he sent me back like a master of my demos and was like, "These are the songs I would have chosen. Here's the track order I think it should be." And I was like,
Nice.
"What?" And then he was like, "And here are some like tiny, minute details that I would offer advice on." Like he
Yeah,
really listened to the whole thing.
it's
And then
amazing.
2 days later sent me a revised version, was like, "Actually, no, I think it should be this." So he
It's like
chose,
your own personal AI machine, eh?
yeah, it was really nice. And I had
Well,
spent the whole record basically in an insular place, like just very much this was a feedback loop of me plus me. And to have this unexpected third party come in and kind of make a judgment call was really helpful.
that's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. And somebody that you trust as well with sharing your music with,
Yeah.
which can be a bit intimidating or
Always. It
I wanted
always.
to touch a little bit on that, Jenny, too, is like you play in a lot of bands, bassists tend to be kind of, in the background, Um, how have you found that shift from when you go out there and it's you, and you're not in the background anymore? How, how does that work for you? How did you grow into being able to do the bass stuff and play for others, but then also have that vulnerability to be the front person of your own music?
I mean, I definitely started and am most comfortable as bassist or keyboard or guitar, whatever, mostly in the background, like a hello every now and then. Um, I think that it's such a vulnerable process to put yourself out there to be like, this is what I think it should sound like, or this is me. Um, I have a harder time with releases than performances because to me, performances are very similar. I do get a little bit more like, oh, attention is on me when I'm being the front person, but I have been doing that for a long time too. And also, I've had some really great role models to um, emulate.
Yeah.
Releasing is still hard, but I think it's just like a practice, just like everything else. So I feel that kind of pinch of like, they're going to listen to it. And like, is that good? And then, but I'm so used to it by now because I've been doing
Right.
it since before internet
Right. Right.
that it's just kind of like, oh, the familiar pinch. Yes, hello. And I can't move on. And I've been talking to my husband about this a lot lately because he is a drummer. Drummers don't
Mhm.
normally have solo projects.
Mhm.
And he's working on putting out some stuff. And I hope he doesn't mind me talking about it. And he was like, "This is terrifying. Like, this is so hard and this isn't
Right.
good." And I was like, "You haven't had the benefit of not realizing that it was bad and putting it out." Like, the people that have gone up until their taste has been like honed and into something impressive without releasing anything are going to have such a hard time putting something out because it's never going to be up to their standards. And I put out some really bad stuff already, so it's fine.
Well, that's opinion wise, but I mean, I went back to your back catalog and I've been listening to it in preparation, and I mean, it's got a really amazing foundation, your music. And I really do think that it's like Teeth is such a great record. I was fortunate enough to get to listen to it completely, and it just has a great flow to it. I love this idea too. I think you coined this witchy rock.
Yeah.
Where did that come from? Like what made that name stick for you?
Okay, I'm gonna be totally honest.
Yes, please.
I I love like oracle decks and tarot cards and like I guess divination stuff.
Mhm.
And it was my birthday and I was on tour with Mitski and they gifted me a tarot reading for my birthday. They brought a tarot person reader to come and and she had me pick out a couple decks and we did like a reading. It was really fun and it was all about like putting yourself out there and like you're gonna release something. I don't know what it is, but like and it was like you're
Wow.
gonna release it on the full moon, kind of like because the full moon is meant to be a time of manifestation, completion, and like releasing, like letting go.
Right.
And she did not mean a record. Like she, I'm sure, meant like letting like some emotion go or something.
Right,
And I
right.
was like, oh, I'm gonna release a record. And she was like, oh, yeah, okay. And and that like divine intervention kind of what was the cause of why it's out on a Monday and not a Friday.
Right.
And also kind of got me started on this path. But then I went and looked at it and like I was like, oh yeah, that's because it's spooky, I think a little bit, but I
Mhm.
wouldn't say spooky like dark and Halloweeny. I would say spooky like a little bit like a spell, you know.
Yes, I agree
Um,
with you.
I
Yeah.
think that I think it's different and I've kind of always leaned toward it's not always prevalent in my music, but like Tim Burton or Danny Elfman or something kind of like that. But
Right.
I think this isn't that necessarily. And so that's how I started to differentiate it. And
Mhm.
I'm kind of like a witchy person. So
Well, I love your description of that. And I do. There is a sense of this eerie,
yeah.
but then these undertones of this beautiful, like great pop. I mean, great indie pop. I mean, it's got so many splashes of different personality and genre. It's really hard. I'm glad you made your own genre because it was hard to. This is a little like that, a little like that, but
Yeah.
the witchy just kind of like, and then you start to hear that kind of that imagery, the sound. I would say more than your actual
Yeah.
lyrics, but yeah,
Yeah. And it's
it's
like
really cool.
sometimes repetitive. It's a little bit like stirring
That's right.
ingredients together, you know, like chanting a mantra or like whatever, you know.
Amazing, amazing. Well, Jane, I just want to thank you for spending some time with me. These stories are really cool. I'm glad that we got to put them down on tape, and
Right.
that we can all listen back to them. Um, Maybe just my final question is, what's so the record's coming out, Teeth, in 2 days, Monday.
Yep.
What else is coming down the pipe for you in 2024?
All right. Well, I'm doing a lot of touring for work this year. I'm hoping to get out there a little bit for I'm trying to work up a solo set. I have a band in LA too, but I'm interested in stripping down the songs even further and kind of remaking a live version.
Hmm.
And I'm also doing a lot of composition this year. I think I'm really getting away from lyrics for the year. I'll come back for sure, but
Yep.
some ambient noise stuff and some orchestral stuff. And I'm so excited to see how those are going to blend together. Right now they're very separate, but
Right.
who knows?
Right. Keep stirring the pot.
Yeah,
Keep
exactly.
stirring.
Exactly.
And is that Ben out West Pen Pin? Is that
Oh,
the band you're talking about?
yeah. And so
Cool.
glad you mentioned that.
Yes.
Um, Pen Pen is me and my friend Emily Moore. We met
Mhm.
playing for Mitzi, and she was part of the cult for the
Okay.
2022 tour. And
Mhm.
we have almost finished a full-length record, and I'm so excited to try to put that out. We were delayed. That was going to come out during this period of time, actually, but she got diagnosed with breast cancer, and
Mm.
that kind of puts a damper on some of the
Sure.
more, it kind of puts your life in perspective a little bit.
Absolutely.
She's
Oh,
currently recovering from surgery and is going to go through some radiation, and totally gave me permission to talk about this, just so everyone
okay,
knows. I
cool.
think it's really important that everybody should check themselves or make sure that they get breast examinations.
Yep.
So as she's recovering from that and as that continues, we are really excited to get back into that. And I think that's going to be great contrast to like my weird, I'm just going further down that rabbit hole of ambient noise. And then I'll be having a fun indie pop project as well.
Amazing.
That'll kind of balance it
Amazing.
out. I'm going for balance.
Right, right. Well, continue your making, continue stirring that pot. This has been really fascinating to talk with you. I really appreciate you taking some time out of your day and I'm sure busy schedule to share some of these stories and how it became to be. It's been really, really fun. And all the best in 2024.
Thank you so much.